Is there an outlet underneath here somewhere?
There's one on this side.
Oh, right here. There's a whole power strip. So sorry that I did not.
Okay. And we should be
I will
good
also
now,
need it.
so
All right,
you can start in 10 minutes.
all right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Linda Heisman-Powell, and I serve as the chair of the Behavior Analyst Advisory Committee of the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. I ask the members of the advisory committee to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being conducted in hybrid form with some individuals remote by conference call or other electronic medium, and some individuals present at the board's office. Jacqueline Lightcap.
I believe she's absent today.
Okay. Allison Bell.
Here.
Emily Kessler.
I think she'll be logging in a little bit later.
Okay. Christy Steele
Here.
and Alice Zhang.
Here.
All right. I note the following BSRB staff members are also present: David Fye
Here.
and Leslie Allen.
Here.
Next, David Fye will read a message concerning this meeting being held remotely.
This is David Fye, Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the public to address the advisory committee about its concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or COMA, does not require the advisory committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Individuals requesting to provide public comment to contact the executive director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov. There will be no public comment at this meeting as no individual requested to provide public comment. Because we are conducting this public meeting in hybrid form, I state for the record the following information. Access to this meeting is being conducted in person and by medium of interactive communication that allows members of the public without cost to attend the meeting through the use of the conference call or by viewing the board's YouTube channel. While the meeting is conducted in hybrid form, the requirements of COMA are not suspended. As such, we will be conducting this meeting pursuant to the COMA. On July 6, 2023, we sent notice of the meeting to all individuals who had requested notice of meetings. The notice was also posted on the board's website, ksbsrb.ks.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other media material have been posted on the board's website and are available for review. You may also request a copy of the agenda specifically by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov with the subject line request for the agenda, and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and the YouTube channel that allows members of the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if we have any technical issues during the meeting, you may call or you may email the BSRB at bsrb@ks.gov. A recording of the meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting by using the link to the meeting on the agenda. And as I was going through the preliminary information, Emily Kessler did join the Zoom connection, so she is in attendance as well. And the conference call line is active. Is there anyone on the conference call line? Okay, there's no one currently on the line, but if I hear a beep, I will let you know so that we can recognize that person.
All right, perfect. The meeting is now called to order, and the advisory committee will begin its discussion of the first item on the agenda. Does everybody have their agenda available? All right. So the first thing that I would like you all to do is look at the agenda and tell me whether or not you approve the agenda as presented.
I think Emily's not muted.
Okay, I think she is now.
Okay. All right.
Now, what did you need? I'm so sorry.
Look at the agenda that was sent, and do you see anything? Does it look okay to you? Is there anything that you want to add?
Great.
Nope, looks good. All right,
Motion to approve.
all right. Motion to approve, Allison seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries.
First motion, good job.
All right, so now the next thing that you have to do is look over the meeting, look over the minutes from the last advisory committee meeting that happened on May 3rd, 2023. And those should have been included in your packet. It's looks like this. And it says draft minutes in the red up at the top.
Need a motion to approve them.
I do.
A motion to approve them.
Thank you, Allison. Allison motions to approve. Right here, second.
That's you. It's me and you there. I second.
All right, thank you, Christy. Christy still seconds. Any discussion? No discussion? Then all in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. So the next thing on the agenda is welcoming me. as
Welcome.
the new advisory chair. So is that something that you do, or do I just tell everybody a little bit about myself?
Well, I'll go ahead and start that.
Okay.
So the board recently met and the governor appointed Linda Heitzman Powell to serve as a board member for licensed psychology. And the statutes for the BSRB, it outlines 12 board member positions, 8 professional, 4 public, and there are 2 for licensed psychology. Unfortunately, there is not one for behavior analysis, but we've always said, you know, a behavior analyst can serve on the board as long as they hold that, you know, they're appointed by the governor to the board for one of the professions and they hold that license. And so the governor did appoint Linda to serve as the board member for licensed psychology with Richard Nobles. And at the last board meeting on July 10th, the chair of the board appointed Linda to serve as the chair of the advisory committee for behavior analysis. So I appreciate you taking on that role. And with that kind of framing this, I thought maybe it'd be nice to kind of have you share any thoughts you have in terms of your new role as chair of the advisory committee.
Yeah, thanks. I am honored to be in this position. And while I'm sorry to see it was Rick Steele who I took over his position, he's really smart. And so I think you guys lost a good board member when he left. But I'm glad that position opened up so that we can have representation on the board, right? I think, you know, everybody that's on this call knows me, that I've been around since dirt. And so I think this is a combination of everything that we have all advocated for over the years to be able to get into this position where we're a legitimately recognized professional discipline, right? So I hold this position seriously, right? I tend to have a sense of humor. I will try to hold that in check during these meetings. However, however, I think I view this as the beginning, not as the end of all these years of advocacy, but as the beginning of our chance to be able to go out and do good in the world, right? And to make sure that we've got structures and systems in place to make sure that we're all going out and doing good in the world, right? And that we all have a voice at the table. And I think that's important, is that we have a voice at the table. And so that's what I want to say.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So, I think, does anybody have any questions for me? Emily, Alice, you guys are, not in person. Do you guys have any questions for me or things that you would like us to take into consideration moving forward?
I just can say that I am glad to see your face still on the board.
Me too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think this is great steps. I hope that we can do more. Looking forward to a very productive year.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so the next thing on the agenda then is our illustrious leader, David Fye, is going to give us the executive director report.
Well, thank you, Linda, and congratulations again on being appointed the chair of the
Thank you.
advisory committee. I'll start with some updates on BSRB operations, just to kind of let you know a little bit about the work that we're doing here in the office. Every year, each state agency has to provide some annual reports It's part of the state's overall auditing process. It's something called the GASB. And so on behalf of the BSRB, I've been working on about 15 annual reports that deal with different types of operations the state agencies perform. And so I went ahead and completed all of those on behalf of the agency and submitted those. So that has been taken care of. Additionally, each year we're asked to do revisions to the agency's 3-year IT plan. So the Office of Information Technology Services has us submit a document that basically outlines who we are as an agency in terms of the size of our budget, how many full-time equivalent positions we have, and then it talks about goals that we have and recent accomplishments that we have. And just to kind of bring it from last year to this year, one of our goals last year was we wanted to have a better camera for our boardroom to be able to do hybrid meetings, and we have that now. And we also were looking at changing some of our outdated equipment and having better equipment. So one of those things is we have a new projector for our boardroom that helps facilitate these meetings. But we are also shifting over any remaining desktop computers from the staff to laptop computers. We have some remaining desktop computers.
There's at
least
5 in the office.
Yeah, so when I came on board about 2.5 years ago, we started a process where we were trying to move about 1/3 of the office towards desktop as a service under a leasing program at the state. And they have laptops that essentially we have an agreement with OITS through Dell, and then we can use those for a period of time and then return them, but get assistance through OITS. And so we moved over a few of us right away, and then a few more last year, and then this year should be the remaining staff members. And so but it should be on a rotation, so that way we're not all coming up at the same time. So kind of staggering that. So that's something we're still working on, but that should be finished this year. And then also we have a goal to convert our paper records to electronic records. That's not an easy process or a fast process, but it's a good goal. Part of it is that we have, every state agency has a document retention schedule on file with the state. And for ours, it has said for many years that we would keep license files until expiration plus about 10 years, and then we would transfer to an archive. Well, in terms of moving to electronic records, it made sense if we could try to shorten that schedule. So that way, when we do convert to electronic records, we have far fewer records to convert. So I made a request and that proposal to the State Records Review Board last month. And I asked if we could shorten our licensing file retention schedule to expiration plus 2 years instead of expiration plus 10. And they asked some questions about it, but thought that that made sense for us. And so they agreed to do that. So that has been approved. The next step in the process would be to get approval to be able to keep records electronically versus paper. And there's a committee that meets in September, so I'll be trying to make that request of them. In the meanwhile, we're trying to figure out how best to scan those documents, how best to store them, having offsite backups to make sure we meet all the requirements, but we're moving along in that process, and that'll be really helpful. I think in a year from now or a year and a half, perhaps, we'll have a lot more space here in the office to be able to use, and then we can use what storage space we do have for anything that's just remaining for existing licensees. So really excited about that. In terms of some other operations updates, every year we are required to submit one additional report, and that has to do with individuals who qualify for licensure through reciprocity. Back in 2021, there was a bill that was 2021 House Bill 2066, and it was primarily for reciprocity applicants for military members, military spouses, but it was also included for those who reside in Kansas and those who intend to reside in Kansas. And as part of the changes in that bill, one of the requirements was an annual report. The first report was last year. And every licensing agency included in that bill has to track those over the course of the year. There are certain timeframes that people qualify for licensure under that bill. For the military members, those need to be processed within 15 days of having a complete application. For the non-military that qualify under that, it's 45 days. And so we've been tracking that. We will submit our second group of data for that in September of this year. And so right now we're trying to pull all that information and make sure that we understand, did we meet those timeframes? And if we didn't, what are the reasons why we didn't meet the timeframes? Last year, we submitted our report and we met the timeframes, and we did really well with that category of individuals. And this year, I just waited to get the numbers back, but we will provide a report, and then our information will be combined with other agencies and submitted in a group report, and then the legislature will make that available at some point. In terms of other items we've been working on here, there was a big bill that passed this session called 2023 sub for Senate Bill 131. And that bill was a significant bill for the BSRB. It did include two small items, one for the Board of Healing Arts, one for the Board of Pharmacy. But the remainder, the majority of the items were items the BSRB had either requested or items the legislature had added that would affect the BSRB. And so since that bill has now been enacted, we were able to implement some of those items as of July 1st. We did send a message out to all licensees at the end of June, letting them know, here's all the items in the bill. Based on our time frame, here's what we could implement immediately. Here's the other items we're going to be working on, and we'll roll those out as we go. Some of the items we've been working on recently have been putting out community-based licenses and allowing people to apply for student addiction counselor licenses. And so we have received the ability to charge the fee for those. We have been creating the applications for those. And then behind the scenes with our licensing host, we have to have the ability to actually produce those licenses once we get that. So that involves some testing in a test environment and then also in a live environment. And we're very close, but I think sometime in the next few weeks, we'll be able to take another step forward on some of those items. In terms of some other items here in the office, in combination with those new licenses and additional responsibilities in terms of timeframes for licensing in general, we received authority to hire 2 new licensing specialist positions. So one thing we've been doing over the last month, we created position descriptions, advertised for those 2 spots, and then interviewed a lot of candidates for those. And we did select 2 individuals who were actually current employees of the agency, and they applied to take on some additional responsibilities and move up to a higher level position. So really excited that they're wanting to challenge themselves, and I think they'll be great in their new roles. This does mean, though, that it creates some vacancies for their positions. So we'll be advertising and looking to fill those, but I'm hopeful in the next month we'll have that taken care of and be fully staffed. In terms of getting a step up on that, we about a month ago, I asked if there could be some temporary staffing to come and help us out here in the office. And so we've had a couple of individuals who've been helping us out. I'm interviewing someone else on Monday to try to come in just to give us another couple sets of hands to help moving files. I mentioned we shortened that document retention schedule, but part of that process means we now have 8 years of records that need to be boxed up and transferred. And so, so there's just a lot of dominoes falling, and we're trying to make sure they all fall in the right order. In terms of other items, the last one in terms of operations is every agency must submit a budget, the division of budget, by September 15th every year. And so last year, the legislature approved a budget for fiscal year 2023, revisions to that year, and then a new budget for fiscal year 2024, which we're currently in, and then also for 2025. And so this year we'll be submitting revisions to 2024 and also revisions to 2025. And so we will be submitting that here in about a month. I don't anticipate any significant cost above what we were approved for last year. There was an increase in our expenditures of about $100,000, but that had to do with us hiring 2 new positions. So when we figure out all the fringe benefit costs, we might have some small adjustments, but I don't expect any big adjustments to that. In terms of other information, I try to keep you guys updated as far as items from the recent board meetings. And there was a board meeting on July 10th. I mentioned that Linda was appointed to the board, and she's now the chair of the advisory committee. David Stevens is another new board member. He is taking the spot as a public member formerly held by Jonna Norton. Additionally, there should be one more appointment any day for an addiction counselor spot. Deb Stidham has served 2 terms on the board, and so she's scheduled to come off. The governor has not made an appointment for that spot, but I expect to hear anything perhaps this week, perhaps next week. But when I do, we don't expect any other changes until next year. In terms of other items we are working on from that board meeting, the board considered some proposed changes to regulations. Part of passing that bill, it sets the cap for all the fees, but we need specific authority to charge an amount for those fees within the cap. And the proposed changes on the regulations that have been submitted have to do with fees primarily for new licenses in that bill. There's a couple of other items. Earlier this spring in January, the board voted to decrease temporary license fees for some of the licenses so that it would make them all $50. So it brought them, some of them were already at 50, but the other ones it brought back down to standardize. It seemed to make sense to keep them all around that $50 range. So some of these were fee decreases and some of them were new fees for that bill. And then there was setting a fee for individuals practicing under a multi-state compact for psychologists called SIPAC. And part of that is because SIPAC actually charges the BSRB every year based on how many people practice under that compact. And so this is a way for us to make up some of the costs that we're being billed for by people practicing under the compact. And then there's a $20 fee for people who are applying to become new board-approved supervisors for professional counseling and marriage and family therapy. So it won't affect anybody who's currently a board-approved supervisor. It'll just be for individuals who are coming on board. And that fee was intentionally kept pretty low just to compensate us for the staff time that's used to review those and approve those. In terms of other updates, concerning those proposed changes to regulations that I mentioned, we are in a time of public comment right now. So if any individuals have thoughts on those, they can submit those to me electronically. We also have an official meeting here at the BSRB office. It's on Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023, from 10 a.m. until 11 a.m. That has been posted on our website. It was also published in the Kansas Register. And so any individuals can show up at the board office that day to provide public comment on any of the proposed changes to those fee regulations. The proposed language is actually on our website too. If you go to the statutes and regulations tab, there's one that the drop down for proposed regulations, and that separates it out by profession. So those are all in there. In terms of some other updates, there are many associations that we work with for the different professions, and they hold annual meetings in a lot of cases. So I will be trying to attend several of those meetings this fall. Two that are coming up involve the marriage and family therapy profession and also the psychology profession, and that will be at the end of September. And then there will be one for social work also at the end of the year. I think it's in November. We will be also looking at putting together an RFP for impaired provider program. The board recently talked about that. Some of the other agencies here in Kansas, like the Board of Nursing, and I believe the Board of Pharmacy, have a program set up. Some states have programs like this, which allows licensees to voluntarily submit themselves if they're struggling with mental health concerns or substance use concerns. Other states use it as an alternative to some disciplinary remedies if there are some violations of regulations, but they find that there's also an issue involving those topics. Perhaps there's a way to use a program like this to assist the work of the disciplinary committee. So the BSRB is interested in putting out an RFP to see what services can be provided. Additionally, the board has been charged to create something called an expedited license review process. That was a brand new item the legislature added. There's not a lot of detail in terms of what that will involve, but I've talked to my staff here in the office, and we put together what we think would be helpful in terms of a process that would allow us to move certain types of applicants through the process quickly. We realize that there are some applicants that it's going to take more time, either if they had, past felony convictions, or they know that there's going to be some issues with references that need to be examined more closely, or for some of the professions, if they attended a school that's not accredited by a national accrediting body. There's just certain cases we know that will take further review and further investigation. But there are some applicants that we believe, if they can provide everything to us and we get it all in a timely manner, we believe we can move those through quickly. And this would be a way for us to prioritize those cases. And so we put together some basic language for the board at the last board meeting. The board was in favor of that. So we're going to try to put it in regulation language form and then bring it back to them at the next board meeting in September. That would not be effective until it actually became official regulation. And based on the time frame the regulations are reviewed and approved, probably what we're looking at is that would not be something that could be utilized until maybe the very end of this calendar year, but more likely sometime early next year. And then the board also tries to hold an annual offsite planning meeting once a year. Last year it was in Kansas City. This year it will be in Wichita. So, it will be on Monday, October 23rd, 2023, from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. It will be at Watson Park in the Seasons venue. And so
That's a choice.
it will be a good meeting. And so I managed to do some research and talk to some individuals, and I think it'll be good. And it is a public meeting. And so we will have it open.
Have you been to one?
I have not.
Okay, I know I'm being live streamed. I would highly recommend that you check that out before you have it there.
Okay. We'll do a little bit more research.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting me know. I'll do some more research on that. The tentative plan, I suppose, is to hold it at that location on the,
It's much better, often they have free buildings there.
okay,
Just for the.
that is good to know. Okay. Well, I'll do a little bit more research on that, but I appreciate you letting me know about that. But it should still be on that date, Monday, October 23rd from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And board members will be, I believe almost all the board members indicated they could attend, so we'll be in Wichita that day. So I'll share more information when we have more information. And then in terms of any other remaining items, so there are some legislative meetings coming up I did want to make you aware of as well. I try to keep the board informed of any kind of meetings that involve mental health topics or something relevant to the BSRB. I mentioned the proposed changes to regulations. So there is a committee of the legislature that reviews those changes to regulations. It's called JCAR, or the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations, and they will meet on Monday, August 21st. That will be at the Capitol in room 582 North. The meeting starts at 10 a.m., but I'm not sure where we will be on the agenda, but likely we could be towards the end, but that meeting will be broadcast on the legislative YouTube channel. And then the legislature approved an interim committee. It's the 2023 Special Committee on Mental Health. And that's going to be meeting on Wednesday, August 23rd at 9 a.m. at the Capitol in room 112 North. And then the next day as well, Thursday, August 24th at 9 a.m. at 112 North. And some of the topics they'll be talking about the first day will be to receive agency presentations on the mental health intervention teams, federally qualified health centers, and certified community behavioral health clinics. And there will be a roundtable discussion by stakeholders. And then on Thursday, the tentative schedule indicates receiving a presentation on the 988 National Suicide Prevention Hotline, youth suicide prevention research, telehealth presentations, and agency updates on the 2020 Professional Committee on Mental Health Modernization and Reform, and also committee comments and recommendations. And I did notice on the YouTube channel for the legislature, they've also blocked off, or they've scheduled a stream for Friday, August 25th for that committee. It was not listed on the dates of interim meetings. So that either means they are keeping that day active in case they need to run to an additional day if they don't complete their work on that Thursday, or it means they're still working on agenda topics and they will be holding a meeting that day too, but they haven't finalized their potential agenda topics. But as of right now, that's all I can say. It's not on the one calendar, but it is reserved on the YouTube stream. So with that, I think I will end my report and answer any questions on those topics.
I have a question. Going all the way back to the beginning when you were talking about the expiration plus 10
Yes.
for the licenses, and it was approved to expiration plus 2. So when, as a licensable profession, if we're obligated to keep records until they turn 18 plus 5, is that what it is?
Okay. 21+7.
21 plus 7. I knew it was
Forever.
something. I knew it was somewhere around there. My question is, if, let's say I have somebody that I worked with when they were like between the ages of 2 and 5. And so now they're 26 and something comes up. Where am I going to be able, and they want me to produce my records? And maybe there's a question about whether or not I held an active license at that time.
So
Do
the.
you see where I'm going with
I
that?
think so. Yeah, I should have clarified that too. So the licensing records are not destroyed after we move them. So the Historical Society has deemed that our licensing files they have a historic value. And so
We do.
basically, yeah. And so we will be able to move them after expiration plus 2 years, but we will box them up and then the Historical Society will take ownership of them. So
Okay,
in the future, if we need something, we can make a request to them and then they can
Okay.
provide it.
okay, so they go over to the Historical Society, so they're not shredded.
Right. Yeah, they're not
Stored in like the underground or something.
I'm not sure exactly where they keep them, but
That's what
They do keep them.
they go to the caves,
Yeah.
literally.
And I should mention too, in terms of official licensure, so we have our verification portal on the website. And that should say the date range someone was licensed, even if we don't have the physical copies of those records here
Okay,
on site
okay.
anymore. That verification portal should still say the range, so.
Okay, all right, that was my question.
Good.
Alice or Emily, do you guys have any questions about anything that David covered? So.
I do
No, okay. Allison, you know, the policy that's making the round,
Yes.
is that pertinent to this group?
I don't, the children's behaviorist one that we were
Uh-huh.
talking about, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's gonna be. So there is a state plan amendment proposal for a children's behaviorist interventionist code to be added to the state plan. And it appears on the surface that they're gonna have to do the RBT training. Or
The registered behavioral technician training?
yes, a 40-hour applied behavior training is what the actual statement says. But they're gonna be overseen by a licensed mental health professional for the LMHPs.
LMLP,
It's LMHP.
LMHP.
So, and the LMHPs includes pretty much everyone that's, licensed by the BSRB except for behavior analysts, which I find weird and interesting. So I don't know if that is applicable here, or if we want to chat about who's going to be overseeing them, or if this is the appropriate place to advocate for BCBAs to be included or LBAs to be included in the LMHP definition. I've written a public comment letter for the state plan amendment proposal about adding us, but I don't know if this is also an appropriate place to start talking about that.
Well, and the reason I brought it up is because you said on Tuesday, I didn't catch the date, there's an open forum for public comment on policy.
Yeah, this is more of the state plan public comment. and that one
Right,
is
so I don't
on
know how they
Tuesday.
interplay together.
The only way that I really see is that the LMHP definition likely needs to be examined and expanded.
I confess, I don't have a lot of familiarity with this topic. That's,
Yeah, well, it just sort of came out of the blue, right? And then somebody said, hey, look at this. And people were like, whoa, they're talking about people that they're gonna require to take our training, right? But then they're gonna be overseen by somebody over here instead of us. And it just, so I don't know if it's something that
I also didn't
falls
realize
under the
that,
jurisdiction of our
there-
subcommittee or.
I also didn't realize that there was another like definition of mental health providers in the state. I had to look up what LMHPs were, and I
Yeah.
found that in the mental health fee for service manual. And like I said, it includes pretty much everyone except behavior analysts. And I don't know if that was because it happened and was defined before we were being licensed by the BSRB, or if it was purposeful.
I think it was
It was probably pre LBA.
us, right? And so it just seems like it's an intersection between the state plan, Medicaid services, and us, the BSRB, or, you know, and then specifically us as a subcommittee, because if they're naming all these professions that are licensable by the BSRB, then I think that we should be included too.
Yes.
And if we're not included, I mean, so is this the forum to bring that up and advocate for that?
Well, so I think the role of the advisory committee is to assist the work of the board.
Uh-huh,
But you can forward recommendations to the board, and the board could vote to take official action to do something on those recommendations. So I think there could be a recommendation. I personally don't know a lot about this topic, so I can't really weigh in with
yeah,
any familiarity, but
but procedure wise.
procedurally, yeah, and you may want to. Is there a meeting coming up where it's going to be discussed? Is that
No, so the public comment period ends on August 15th
Okay.
for like submission of public comment.
okay?
And I know there's a couple that I circled my letter to and said, here's what I'm telling them. But I don't know what the steps are after that.
Okay, yeah, I think my gut instinct would just say procedurally, it would be good to have that as like an agenda topic. We can always add items to the agenda, of course, but just to give people a chance to kind of research it a little bit. But since it's coming up so quickly on August 15th, if we put it on the next one, it would already have been passed.
It
by that
will,
point.
yeah, already have taken place. And then the other thing, have you heard of that LMHP designation?
It's the licensed mental health provider, and like I said, I found it in, well, I
Yeah,
was trying to find out what year this was. Oh, this was updated January of 2023, so recently it's been updated, and that's where that definition came from, and I was gonna tell you guys who all it includes
Okay.
specifically. So the licensed mental health professional is an individual who is licensed in the state of Kansas to diagnose and treat mental illness or substance abuse, acting within the scope of all applicable state laws and their professional license. LMHP providers licensed to practice independently, licensed psychologist, licensed clinical marriage and family therapist, licensed clinical professional counselor, licensed specialist clinical social worker, licensed clinical psychotherapist, and then LMHP providers licensed to practice under supervision includes master's level MFTs, professional counselor, social worker, and psychologist.
Okay.
So literally everyone
except,
except behavior analysts.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to include the bachelor's level for like social work and.
It does
addiction
not.
counseling.
It says they actually identified the qualified mental health professional, the QMHP, is a master's level clinician,
Okay,
and they are employed by a community, a CMHC, and hold an individual holding a medical degree or an advanced nurse practitioner. So they have to be a master's level or a master's level clinician, or have a medical degree, or be an APRN.
okay.
There's too many letters.
And it sounded like there was the clinical level of one of those licenses, or there was the master's level under.
Under supervision of a practicing independently person.
Okay,
and so then I think the advocacy for us as behavior analysts that we have seen is that the training requirement for that certain level of clinician is our training, right? And it doesn't have analysis on there, but it's 40 hours of applied behavioral training.
Yeah.
And then they would be supervised by somebody other than
A behavior.
a behavior analyst, right? So. And then this class of licensed mental health professionals that nobody had any inkling of, and then not being included in there, so.
Does
Seems like there's
Kansas
an
have an
intersection.
association for behavior analysts?
We do, and it's already been brought to their attention. I also serve on their executive committee
Okay.
and legislative committee, and they're looking into the ability to advocate on that since they're a 501c3. We can't do a lot of like lobbying.
Right,
And so they're trying to figure out, does this fall under that or not, if we make a like public comment about it. So it is something that's been brought to their attention. But we're kind of, there's a very short turnaround time right now. So
yeah,
well, I think, so kind of from a procedural standpoint.
yeah,
If any of you wanted to provide public comment on your own behalf, nothing would limit you from doing that
okay,
just because you're a member of this committee.
right, well,
Yeah.
because see, that's the other thing too, is that by being a member of this committee, I mean, not representing ourselves as being a member of this committee, but as a private citizen, right?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, because you want to be careful that you're not speaking on behalf of the board unless the
Correct.
board is said something like that. And so I think this could be something that, your advisory committee might make a recommendation to the board to look at this further or take a position on. But that would kind of be, that would kind of procedurally be the next step if you wanted to use this body for something like that, because really the advisory committee, the authority is to make recommendations back to the board, and then the board would be able to consider different actions.
So, did you guys hear that, Emily and Alice? Did you hear that whole exchange?
Yes,
So I think,
go ahead, Linda.
I was just gonna say, so it sounds like, that we need to decide if we want to make a recommendation to the board to review this licensing. Yes, ma'am.
what we were talking about was that she found another public notice from the Division of Healthcare Finance of that looks like it's revising that definition of that LMHP. I can't really tell what's different about it, but it just doesn't list out the specific people, and it has open public comment until August 28th.
Okay. So does that mean did you guys hear what Allison just said?
Yeah, I was wondering if it's possible to share those public comment links and stuff. That's so that I'm trying to look for it, but I didn't find the public comment. So if you can share that link, that'll be helpful. I don't know how we can send that.
I can forward. I'm capable of forwarding. I don't know if I'm supposed to. Of forwarding the email string with Brenda Soto, who's the one that sent me the state plan amendment and then my letter, because
Okay.
you have to request copies of it. But the other one, again, this is weird. The proposed effective date of the state plan amendment that's revising the definition of LMHPs is the effective date is August 1st, but it's open for public comment until August 28th.
Okay.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
As well.
Well, if you want, you could just forward it to me and then I can send it out to the members of the committee. That might kind of keep it a little bit cleaner.
Yeah,
Why?
thank you. Yeah, that.
And I would be for like us to propose steps. We want the board to review this further.
Because when's the next board meeting?
Next board meeting is in September.
It's not till, yeah, the next larger board meeting isn't until September. So all this is gonna happen before that next meeting. So procedurally, David, like, so let's say they do this thing and it we've got public comment and it passes all before the next larger board meeting. If we still put in a request to have the larger board review it and note whether or not there was I don't want to say discriminatory, but an exclusionary practice that had occurred, an oversight that had occurred that we were not included in that. Is that something then that the board could go to the powers that be and say, hey, we would like to request everything that's up for review? Or
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the board could give me direction to contact someone on the board's behalf, or
Okay.
they give me direction to draft a letter, kind of making the board's position known or something like that.
okay,
So, but I think the next step here would probably be just to bring this kind of conversation to the board meeting and then just have the board consider the next step.
okay. Is that good with you guys? That I'll just bring it to the next board meeting as the chair? Or let David do it?
I'll make a note so that it gets put on the agenda. I usually meet with the board chair maybe about a week or two before the board meeting to kind of set the agenda. But I'll mention this as one of the discussion items and
Okay,
then maybe the board chair can follow up with you for some additional information.
all right,
I just sent you both the state plan amendment
Okay.
proposals.
Sounds good.
thank
That's
you.
good, because I've been trying to find it. I Googled
You
it, and
can't
I'm
Google-
not finding
So
anything.
the children's behaviorist one, you can't, there's no copies of it on the internet. You have to request it from the
Okay.
local
Isn't
health
that
department.
weird?
Yeah,
It's just so weird that somebody somewhere saw it and then forwarded it out, and I got it from two different people. I got it from somebody else and I got it from you, Allison, but you actually reached out to that person and requested that copy because we couldn't find it.
Yeah, I Googled the heck out of it one
Yeah.
day and could not find it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm just gonna take the easy route now.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
so, anyway. All right, so are we okay with moving on then from that? Yeah, all right. So aren't you glad that you have such a good group here, you guys?
It's great. You guys always have a really good discussion on topics. So I love it.
Okay, so going on to, if everybody's okay, we'll move on to old business. And we need to talk about adding new board members. Now, one of the things that you should have received was the advisory committee policy on what the board would like to see as a member of an advisory committee. So we really want to, like, if you look at the bottom page 1. The selection of members. We really want to make sure that there's a diverse representation, so as we go through everybody who has submitted an application to be a member of the board, and you should have gotten those materials as well. We want to look at that diverse representation. That includes, but is not limited to, geographic setting, gender, culture, ethnicity, representation of the different levels of licensing, and a good mix of public and private practitioners and educators, right? So we want to make sure that we've got some really good resumes here. And it may be that, when we start looking at representation, that we have to select one from this class of practitioners or providers or professionals. Yes, ma'am.
I told him before everybody got here, on the email that we sent out, Stephanie Willie is listed as an LBA. She's actually an LABA. So, and I would like to sincerely advocate that we have at least one of those. Doesn't have to be her, just one.
Right.
So-
So she is not an LBA?
She's an LABA. She's
LABA.
a BCABA.
And I appreciate you catching that. I did try to look up each of the individuals who had applied to make sure they actually were licensed in Kansas, just to make sure there wasn't any issue there. But on that one, I did.
Does she live in New Jersey, but she practices in Kansas?
I
Which
think
one?
there was,
There was one in Newark, New Jersey, North Brunswick, New Jersey.
Sounds like they opened a.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I know the BCABA. Maybe.
yeah, when people submitted resumes, I generally would use the information from their resumes, for their professional location. Or if we didn't have that, I would look to figure if we could figure out some other way where they're
yeah,
principally located. Some people do move around a little bit, but.
right. So, I'm not sure, I think y'all might have had a chance to look at this, so I'm just gonna go through, to start with, and the first one, and I believe they're in alphabetical order. This first one is from Alex Bernstein, and he would be a professional in the Casey metro area. He's at Children's Mercy. The next one is, and I just went through and, I'm just looking at diversity, right? The next one would be Pam Neidert, and she would be a professional, university-based, in Lawrence. The next one in here that I have is well, I know her as Amy Sander. Amy Sander, and she's a practitioner from the Casey metro area. So we've got a lot going now from the Casey metro area. The next one I have is Zerbhi Soni, who is Wichita, which would be an urban practice. Her center's in Wichita. And then the next one I have is Stephanie Willie, who seems like it's a non-urban setting.
She's at my clinic.
Oh, she's at your clinic?
She's
She's an assistant, so not an LBA, but an
LABA.
LABA. And then finally, Michael Williams,
Thank you.
is an administrator. And he is from Overland Park, so the Kansas City area.
I think you missed one.
Did I?
Kelly Harrison is.
Oh, yeah.
also in there.
Yeah,
I think you just
I-
skipped over her.
I
after
think I
Alex.
must have. There's Pam. Oh, here she is. Look at, I didn't,
Kelly is also, she's a academic one, but she's
Yeah.
also branching out into her own private practice.
Yeah.
She's leaving KU soon.
And just to
Well,
kind of
is she,
frame it,
She is leaving.
okay, because she is in Lawrence, as I understand it at this point, but.
Okay.
So I just wanted, that's my take on the demographics of the applicants.
Yeah. And just to kind of do a little high level on this too, the advisory committee did include the language you mentioned in terms of different factors to look at, so keep those in mind. Additionally, it does say when you're looking at non-board members on the advisory committee, there should be a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 10.
Thank you.
And so with the members who just came off, there were several that just came off the advisory committee. That puts your number of non-board members at 4. So it does say that it can be helpful to stagger when you're adding people so that everybody doesn't come up all at the same time. But you do have some flexibility here. And so
So we could like maybe select 3 out of here.
you could do 3. Right now you're at 4, so that would bring you to 7, and that would give you some flexibility in future years if you wanted to add.
What do you guys think about that? Like if we selected 3 and then put an open comment out next year? So that we're staggering, you know, yeah, so that people aren't all coming off the board at the same time. Yeah, I see some head shaking. So, yeah. Having said that, I would like to open the floor.
Okay. I thought I'd add one more comment
Yep,
too.
sure.
Sorry, the advisory committee policy doesn't say exactly how you have to do this process. But it does say you can't do secret ballots. So any kind of, if you wanted to do a vote, you could also do it by consensus. And in the past, some committees have gone person by person. Other ones have just said who stood out to you the most. And then that way, if there was a consensus of the top candidates, they just kind of dealt with it that way. So there's not a formal way you have to do it, but that's kind of the 2 options I've seen. And the most prevalent is probably who stood out the most.
Yeah, I think that I'm gonna echo what, for me, and I should probably not talk and let you guys all talk. But I was thinking about it, you know, over the last several days, that it would be nice to have either, I wasn't specifically thinking a licensed assistant behavior analyst. I was thinking more along the lines of a supervisee, right? Somebody that was actively pursuing supervision, but an assistant would serve that same kind of purpose. So that person kind of sticks out to me. So we have different levels.
And I'm gonna not vote on that one because she is my BCABA. So
Yeah.
if you guys like her, that's great, but I'm gonna not vote on that one.
Yeah, it's called recusing yourself.
Recusing myself. She's lovely, but I don't wanna.
I also want to make a comment that if we are tasked with keeping a diverse advisory committee, geographic location, we understand. Gender, we can make assumptions, but we didn't ask directly for gender. Culture and ethnicity, we can also make some assumptions, but we are not getting actual data to make those decisions. And so I would recommend, at least for future situations, that when we're recruiting with letters of interest, that if we're going to make decisions based on that information or informed by that information, that we're asking them to disclose if they're comfortable those identities so that we're not making assumptions.
Yeah,
Because I would like that there are no rural providers on this list.
yeah, that was my whole big thing. I'm probably the closest to a rural provider that y'all have.
I'm gonna text Ally and say, why didn't you apply?
Yeah, you know,
I
Yeah.
literally sent you it.
or like Allison Burkhart in Great Bend,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Well, and this is kind of to let you guys know. So when you requested to open this up to put members on the committee or recommend that, so the official authority of the advisory committees make recommendations. So what you'd be doing today would be making recommendations, and then those would be forwarded to the chair of the board, who has the ultimate authority to name people to the advisory committee, and that would be at a board meeting. But when we sent out the message, I went ahead and had it sent out to all licensees, so they had the ability to kind of submit their materials. And I believe in that message I sent out, I think I used this language from the advisory committee policy that highlighted this. It gets a little tricky legally into what questions we can ask of certain applicants. But next time we do send that message out, I can basically put a little more emphasis on this.
Yeah.
It's a gray line to walk in. But I'd be happy to do that as much as I can, while making sure that we're staying in good legal ground too.
Yeah, I think it's important. If we're not making decisions based on that information, then, you know, that's a different story. But now we're left like Googling people, looking at their pictures, you know, it could be that even for location, it could be that someone lives in Kansas City, but they are driving out to rural areas to provide services. And so
Yeah.
maybe it's just a statement of like, we strongly encourage you to disclose any identities you hold related to these diversity initiative, like a diversity initiative or that statement, as you feel comfortable or as you feel appropriate, so that way it's clear that that will support our decision.
Okay. Yeah, I think as long as we're not requiring people to, I mean, ultimately it's up to them what they want to volunteer in the letter of interest, but I think you bring up a good point in that if these are factors the advisory committee asks you to look at, if they're not provided, how can you properly weigh
Right.
that? So that makes sense. Yeah.
Or
Totally makes
someone may look Western European, but actually be Latinx, or, we can only, I may look female, but I identify as non-binary, and so those assumptions can be faulty.
I do know that Kelly is focusing her new thing on rural Kansas, but I only know that because of our dinner with.
Because of what?
The Kansas board went to dinner with Tyrant Sellers about
Oh,
a month ago. It was like a month ago already. Yeah. So, and she told us at that point that she was getting ready to do this.
Okay. So. Does anybody stand out to you guys? Ally, I combined your names. Alice and Emily.
I feel like I always speak first, so Emily, you go ahead first.
You're perfectly fine. No, Linda, I kind of agreed with you. It would be, I felt like maybe that was a missing piece also, is either having somebody that had that LABA licensure or going through supervision, such as a student member or something like that. So that was the one that stood out to me, just because it was a part that I don't know that we have a voice that represents that.
Right.
I
So.
agree with that as well. I think it's good to have that perspective so that we're not having that very important voice being represented on the board. Another thing that I think stand out to me is that I think it would be helpful to have some educational programs, I guess I'm thinking about PAM specifically, since they are having undergraduate master's level students, and I think it might be helpful to have that perspective so that we can have that. Yeah.
I agree, Alice. I think that Pam was the one that stuck out to me as well, because
Pam.
it does give us that KU representation and those that are helping supervisees or RBTs and going through that process.
Yep. And so, and then,
The other one that stood out to me was Alec Bernstein being at Children's Mercy. I think that's a really cool population that is underrepresented in
Was
the
that-
field in general. Alex.
Yeah.
Or Alec, sorry, Alec
Alec.
Bernstein.
the only. Who is this other person at the back?
Mike Wu.
Yeah, because he's at,
Optimal Outcomes.
yeah, what's that?
It's an ABA agency in Overland Park that's.
And adults, it looks like. Specialized approach, working with adults and delivering, utilizing it.
Yeah, so he sort of, stood out.
He's also a person of color, it appears. By his.
So like when because the only thing for me with, and I know these guys, right? I know Alex. And I know, I know Pam and I know Kelly, we were all on Consaba, right, together. So I know them. But Michael stood out to me just because it seemed like he might have a different perspective on things.
I agree.
I would agree with that.
Okay. So, would those three then be the ones that we would want to, keeping the others open in case, but for perhaps next year so that we're staggering it?
Yeah.
And let these guys know that we thought they were really great. And we would like to invite them to apply again next year, but recommending these three. What do you guys think? Stephanie as the LABA, Pam as the satisfies the educational academic role, and then Michael Williams as somebody with a different perspective outside of EIBI. And what do you guys think?
I love that.
Thank you.
I'm also mightily impressed that we got that quickly through that.
That's because there's only 5 of us here.
And UMKC is different from the United.
Yeah. Yep. UMKC is a University of Missouri, Kansas City versus KUMC, which is Kansas University Medical Center.
Really gotta vary up their letters.
I know.
ABA does too.
All right, so do I need to make this official?
Well, if as long as it's consensus of the group, you don't have to take an official vote.
But we can. Anybody want to make a motion to forward these three to the board?
I motion to forward those three to the board.
Can I pause that motion?
Oh, yeah.
And
Well, because then we can say discussion. We can have a second and then open it back up for discussion, but that's okay. Discussion.
I don't know to say anything. I just didn't want it to keep going so quickly. I'd like to get things done. Yeah. Thinking about, like, Linda, you're an academic to a certain degree.
Yeah, researcher, yeah.
Alice, yeah, as well, and then if we add Pam and Alec, that's 4, we were not, right, Mike? Was it Alec?
it was like, wasn't it?
It was Mike, we've got
Pam.
Pam,
Pam, Nikki.
Stephanie Wiley,
And Mike.
Pam Nider, and Michael Williams.
Those were the three we were. We talked, I thought Alex's resume was very impressive because he does offer like a hospital setting because he's at Children's Mercy.
Right.
And that's when she was like, oh, but this other guy in the back, and then that's. when we
Okay.
found Alex.
I want to continue the discussion, because I like the idea of having Stephanie because she's a BCABA, but I also wonder if I guess I want to consider Kelly Harrison additionally because of the rural, because we know that she's moving into providing services in rural areas.
And does Alice represent the academic piece that we want already? Can you put Kelly in there?
I don't think so, because both Linda and I are not in the program that is like ABS, the apartment.
Right.
We're more like
We don't,
we're more like the alley group. We're in the health system.
we're the redheaded four-eyed stepchildren. of the
Always and forever.
university.
ABA
Yeah.
will always and forever be.
Yeah.
I also think that Kelly's a good choice. She's getting ready to move out of the president position of Canzaba, as well as moving on from KU. So she is going to be able to offer us like a lot of different perspectives. I don't know if that means Pam, or I don't know which of those other people we want to consider to not, but I do love Kelly as well.
We could also,
We can add a 4.
yeah, exactly, Alice. We could also
Yeah.
consider 4 and then 2 for the next round.
Mhm.
That would be another.
Yeah, because right now, the 4 of you guys are gonna come off at the same time, right? And so it's really a brain drain when that many people come off at the same time. And so if we add 4,
You, Mike, Claudia, who else came on? Kim Becker.
Pete Peterson.
Oh, so 5 of them came
Right.
on?
It was 5.
I wondered why this group was so small.
Well, it was the original, that was the original.
That was the original.
From the
that was
very
original
beginning,
group.
so they were all at the same
We
time.
only have,
And she just got moved into a different role.
Right. Technically, we lost Linda as well.
Yeah,
We just-
technically you lost me as well, and the only reason I'm still here is because I also happen to be a licensed psychologist. And there happened to be a position open on the board, so the stars align.
I would also like to make the recommendation for 4 then, if we are all comfortable with that. I think
Mhm.
Kelly would add value in the rural aspect in having served on Kanzava for the last, I don't know how long, lots of
I like,
time.
yeah, yeah, I can go way back, a minimum of 10 years back,
Oh, I'm
I think she would be a good addition as well.
yeah. All right,
I love the letter she wrote. She probably wrote the most passionate letter.
Have you ever, like, she's just a passionate human, I think.
So it sounds like the 4 individuals you were looking at, is it Mike Williams, Stephanie Willie, Pamela Neidert, and Kelly Harrison? Was that the
Correct.
four?
Yes.
Yep,
I would recommend you do it by consensus instead of a vote, just because I believe you said you were gonna recuse yourself
Yes.
Yeah.
on one of those individuals. And so if you made the nomination you called it to a vote, but you were recusing yourself, that might be a little conflicting.
It's a consensus then.
it is, I agree, it's a consensus. Are you guys comfortable with it being a consensus?
Yes.
Yes, all right,
Okay, then what I usually do is I draft a formal letter that basically just lists all the people who applied, the recommendations of the advisory committee, and then I CC the chair of the advisory committee, and then I provide that to the chair of the board, noting that if any follow-up information is requested, the chair can follow up with me or the chair of the advisory committee. So
Okay.
I'll draft that and then I'll send you a copy of this so you can take a look at.
all right, perfect. All right, so moving on, how am I doing on time?
It's 2:17.
Woo-hoo. All right, moving on to the next topic under 6B, continued review of combined proposed changes to the unprofessional conduct regulations for all professions. So David, do you want to refresh our memory on that?
So
We're still paid.
last year, each of the advisory committees were charged to review the unprofessional conduct regulations for their profession. Since there are 7 professionally regulate, each profession has a separate unprofessional conduct regulation, which lists all the different items that if violated would be found to be unprofessional conduct. And so each of those groups' recommendations on proposed changes were forwarded back to the board for consideration. The board put all those together in the attached 42-page document and decided to send that back to the advisory committees. So that way we give you the opportunity to review the changes that had been considered by the Addiction Counseling Advisory Committee and the Marriage and Family Therapy Advisory Committee, because some of those conversations might have been different than what you had for your group. And they wanted to provide an opportunity for you to look at those proposed changes to see if anything another group had recommended might be appropriate for you to bring over to your unprofessional conduct regulations as well. So the goal is to have a good set of proposed recommended changes forwarded back to the board by the end of this calendar year. That way the board will consider them. So you could make additional recommendations to yours at this meeting, or I think you could probably also do that at the next meeting in October as well.
Do we have a date for our October meeting?
No, I don't think so. Some of the other committees have a specific, like the first Monday of the month at 10 a.m. Licensed psychology meets the second Tuesday at 6 p.m. But for yours, you don't have a standing day and time.
We want to get a standing day and time in place, you guys?
I just didn't want to be in Arkansas again, because I was in Arkansas last year when we had one, and I was in the holler. And
Yeah.
it bumped nuts.
So,
So,
recently,
but this, my little bike rally that we do is in September this year, so.
good. So for the most of the advisory committees, they do have a set date and time, but this one has not. But I am all in favor if you guys have a standard date and time that works for you. That way I can start putting those dates on calendars into next calendar year.
I also like that, because I definitely thought this was on Monday next week, because they're usually on Mondays, and then I looked at my calendar and it's like, oh, it's just.
Yeah, you know, standing meetings work better for me because I'm very schedule driven. And my calendar like
Is your.
books out, yeah, like 3 months. So are you guys good with trying to come up with a standing meeting like the
That was a very good schedule.
third? The second
I remember-
Tuesday, the fourth Friday, something like that.
I think
Fridays.
Friday usually
You
works
have all,
good for me, but I'm open
What
to
else?
other times.
What did you say?
I thought Fridays usually works better, but also open to other times.
you are the most busy out of all of us, so why don't you tell us what works best and you.
But Fridays typically work better for me because I try to keep Fridays free. Ish.
I would say that's a little counterintuitive there, Linda. It's okay.
Fridays
This-
typically, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say Fridays typically work better for me. So because we work on a school schedule, I have already booked my school year. So but Fridays I tend to keep free. Most districts don't want us. It's just that my schedule is set for the rest of the year as of right now.
So, and this is monthly,
It's every other month.
every other month.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's even better.
Yeah, the board meetings are in the off months, so.
Okay.
yeah.
All right, so August,
So you
September,
won't be free.
so we're looking to October then, is that correct?
Yes,
Yes,
And then, so it would be,
not Halloween.
let's say, like.
We cannot do the first.
How about the 20th? And we can just do like
Third Friday.
the third Friday of every other month? Does that, oh, stop, I don't wanna see that look on your face.
She said,
Does
Me?
that work for you?
I like that in general, it's just the 20th is the APDA leadership conference.
Well,
Here in DC.
oh, that's in September.
No, that's the cast.
Oh,
leadership
okay.
conference. This is APDA, it's online.
mhm.
I am also at a conference on the 20th.
The second Friday of the month.
Oh, I'm looking at Thursday.
That's Friday. I feel like we can't set our first meeting to be Friday to Thursday.
Fall contest? What does that even mean?
Probably one of the 1,004th.
Yeah, that's Friday the 13th. That's very appropriate for our profession. Then we could have a pretty Cougar cake.
if you wanted to tentatively look at the second Friday of the month. And then does this time work out as far as 1 to 3?
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that work for you, Emily?
I can make that work.
Okay, we get to be the decision makers before we add other people on the board, so.
They just have to make
Would earlier be possible?
It works for me. Earlier is possible for me. What about you? You're
Isn't
coming
that
from
when
Wichita.
in
Well, if you,
I say I can either Zoom or, you know me, I'll get up early.
does earlier in the day work for you
We
guys
have
as
someone
well?
who- we have
No?
another-
For
Oh,
whatever reason, that second Friday of the month, it looks like I currently have a 8:30 to 12:30 meeting.
okay.
Also, they said we can't anyway because they have another
Okay.
professional group that.
All right.
So, 1 to 3, 1 to 3.
1 to 3 it is.
Will you just send those? I don't have to put great.
Yeah, I'll send them out as calendar appointments for the Zoom information. But we'll plan on do the second Friday. Do you want me to go ahead and start doing those into next calendar year?
Yes, absolutely, because if I don't get it on my calendar,
Okay,
It will not happen.
it won't happen.
then I will put those to, what would that be, June of next year, I think.
That works, yeah.
So I will put that on my to-do list.
Thank you.
And David, can you, or Linda, somebody, could you remind me what the absentee policy is? Because like looking through my calendar, that February, I already am supposed to be at a conference. So I don't remember. I thought it was like you could miss 2 in a term.
So the expectations for board members document says board members should have no more than 1 unexcused absence per year. But it hasn't really been enforced. It's more of an aspirational type.
We're also
Item?
on a board.
Not an excuse, Emily, because you're bringing it up now. So it would be an excuse, absence.
Yeah,
And if there's anything that we would have to do, like David sends stuff out beforehand. Like you could provide input, written input to
Perfect.
David, and then he could present it, right?
That would be
Like
fine.
speaking for you.
no, that's.
I feel like I'm small.
I'd be happy to do that, sure. No problem. But yeah, that is, there's language in the advisory committee policy that says the policies and procedures that relate to board members are expected to be followed by advisory committee members or something like that. And it's never been completely fleshed out what that means exactly, but, you know, as much as possible. So that's kind of what the policy is, but like I said, it hasn't been strictly enforced. It's more important for us to know if you're gonna be there or not, just to make sure we have quorum for the meetings.
Right. So Emily, just the only thing is, just make sure to remind us all. Remember, I'm not gonna be at the next board meeting, right? So,
Yeah, you can just send a message to me and I usually make a little extra calendar appointment right before the meeting, just so I know who all has said if they're gonna be there or not, so.
You're so organized.
He is
I know.
very.
It helps.
Organization is the key to success.
We need to go to a class.
All right, so I think that's good. I think that's gonna be beneficial to us to have like a recurring meeting instead of, you know, it's like something that, so here's the other question, like, are we able to have a meeting without you? I'm just saying, let's say that you end up going on vacation during one of these meetings, right?
Mhm.
One of these regularly scheduled meeting times. Can we have Leslie there instead?
I think we could probably arrange that as long as you're comfortable with that. I try to make myself available for any of the advisory committees that are meeting. But yeah, I think if you're comfortable with that, we could prepare for that.
I think it will help us not have to cancel them.
Right.
Because I feel like we've had several in the last year canceled.
Yeah.
For
Yes.
whatever reason. So if we just have like a standing.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so, so that's meeting, that was like an addition, meeting times.
So sorry.
No, it's good.
Okay.
I'm glad that we have that.
And I do want to call this out. I believe our agenda does say that we can take items out of order as necessary to accommodate time restrictions. So
Okay,
we have flexibility.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so now, and you're sending that out, so I can
Yeah.
close my calendar.
I'll take care of
And then, so we have 32 minutes left. And, huh?
It's a chop chop.
Chop, let's do it. We still have some old business, the unprofessional conduct.
I guess my question for all of you is, do you feel like you've had sufficient time to review all of those?
It's been like 2 years of time now at this point.
Well,
well-
we haven't looked at the other people and what they've said.
Right, you did a real in-depth dive on your unprofessional conduct regulations, had a lot of good discussion, and I appreciate all of that. I didn't know if you had a good opportunity to review that from all the other professions to really put yours in context and see if those could be brought over or not, so. If you feel like you have, we could go into some proposed recommendations at this meeting. If you need more time, we could talk about it in October at that meeting.
I would love more time.
Yeah. So do I entertain a motion to table the unprofessional conduct regulations until our next meeting?
High motion.
Allison motions, Christie seconds. All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries, tabled.
I think this is gonna be really helpful.
Yeah, I think it is too. I looked over it. And I was like, okay, it's nice to see what other people have and, you know, we're unique, but we're not different, right? We're all in the health profession. So. Anyway,
Yeah.
all right. Item number 7, new business. So now we need to look at the KAR 102-8-9 continuing education. And thank you very much, David, for including that in here. So we've got a continuing education.
Yeah, and just to frame this, each of the advisory committees, so a bill passed a year or two ago that asked each of the agencies in the state of Kansas to review all of their regulations in a rotating basis over, I think, about 5 years. And to present a report back to the legislature that said, if any of these regulations, well, you have to report back on all of your regulations. If they're necessary for the implementation of state law, and if they're not, they want you to take steps to go about repealing them. but we have to put that report together for the BSRB by 2026. So the goal was to start to look at each of the regulations and give the advisory committee some direction to update these. Last time this continuing education regulation, KAR 102-8-9 was implemented was 2016. Some of the other professions, it was much earlier when they put this into place. So part of this is looking to see, in terms of the total number of hours for your profession, I believe that total is only in regulations instead of statutes. So you do have some authority there to revisit that 30 hours of continuing education if that's suitable. Additionally, if you have any kind of thoughts as far as what is currently counted for continuing education, if those items are still appropriate, if new items should be added, if any items should be removed. And then one of the other items the other advisory committees have been discussing is updating of certain language. For example, I'll just highlight 2 items here. Under item E 4 and 5, there are references to telecast or video tapes and listening to audio tapes. And while I know those still exist, much more commonly it's audio recordings and video recordings. And so 4 and 5, one of the real simple changes could be just to change that from video tapes to video recordings, audio recordings. If people are still using the old technology, won't mean they can't use it anymore. But if people are doing a lot more of this online, using video recordings or audio recordings, that should just clean that up going forward.
Can I ask a question or discussion of the group? Why are we recreating the wheel when the BACB has done this already? Like, why can't we just use their,
Because we can't delegate authority.
well, we're not
Same
delegating.
We had to do the.
Yeah,
I don't think that we're delegating though. We just need to make the requirements the same. So I'll tell you, there's been some times where I like had to do my recertification and mine are on the off. My BCBA one is on the off year of my LBA because LBA came in the middle of one of my research cycles. I do above and beyond CEUs, but that does mean that for some people, they're going to have to redo CEUs even though they just did them a year ago.
Okay. How many continuing education hours do you have to do for BACB?
32.
32. But you shouldn't have to redo them, Allison, because your timeline would just be different.
Yeah,
You would submit, 2022 to the BACB, 2021 and 2022 to the BACB, and you would submit 2022 and 2023
that's if you do
to the
them
BSRB.
like you and I do, where we do them continuously throughout our cycle. But some people will go to a conference and get all of their CEUs for their research cycle. And then they just don't track the other CEUs that they do. So like they went to APBA, got 32 units of CEUs on 2021, and now it's 2023. Even though it doesn't
Right.
line up right. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but that's a different animal than having these requirements be the same. I mean, it's just a 2-year cycle.
Yeah.
Right,
And the 2-year cycles in statute,
yeah,
it
Yeah.
would require a statute change.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we change the
Yeah.
number. I'm just saying like, if this one's 30, can we just make that very parallel to the BACB?
you're just saying increases of 32
Yes.
is what your recommendation is.
Yeah.
Because.
Consistency.
So this, again, I've come into the same situation Allison is describing where I needed to get like 8 CEUs. Because my LBA was expiring and needed to be renewed, but my BCBA, I still had another year to CEs. And so it was a bit of a scramble the last couple months to make sure I set aside the time to get those done. Not the end of the world, but I think it would be much more convenient if maybe like when you initially certify or when you're initially licensed, it's almost like a temporary until you get to your research date for the BCBA. And then that's like the cycles are lined up
Well, let's ask the BCBA
for the BACB.
or the BACB to change their requirements to map onto our state requirements. Sorry. No,
No.
but
Go ahead.
they will do it though, because they did it for me. Because I have a type 2 CE individual, type 2 CE Juniper Gardens Children's Project. And then I've got my BCBA at the doctorate level, right? BCBA D. and they were all at different times.
Mhm.
And I got in touch with them and I said, look, this is crazy.
Mhm.
I can't do this and keep, I can't keep it all straight.
Mhm.
And so they changed my end date so that they all came on.
Can we make that
Um,
public knowledge that they can ask for that? Because. that
Well,
would
it
be
is public
lovely.
knowledge, right? Because this meeting is a public knowledge meeting. Now, they may come back to me and retroactively change my.
Yeah.
Change the decision.
back to the way it was before, but they did it for me.
Okay.
That's
So,
nice.
That was very
Because
nice.
I can say we tried to do that and we don't have statutory authority to
Okay.
change the cycle.
Okay.
Because other people who have like dual licensing wanted to do that and we were unable to accommodate them.
yeah. Okay. So, but I would check in.
So you can
Yeah.
ask, but probably gonna get told no.
From us, from our board. Yeah, we can't do it. But-
Yeah, because the length of a licensure period is defined in statute, and so we can't shorten it.
Mhm.
Even if someone wants to give up some of their license time to get things all synced up,
Mhm.
we don't have any ability to do that.
So I think what my recommendation is, now that I have this other knowledge, is that we need to increase it to 32 and mirror the 4 CEUs in ethics and 3 CEUs in supervision for supervisors.
4 hours. is already there.
Yeah, I
The
think,
4 hours is already there.
Yeah.
The supervision one. I did that one, Margie. Good job.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Why do we want to increase the requirement to, because I feel like, we're gonna having that 30 anyway, because we have 32 for BCBA. But like, why do we have to?
Why would we
increase?
use the industry standard though? This is what our other board says.
Well, that's what the BACB, but what does the QABA say? I mean, there's just throwing it out there. There's several other regulatory agencies out there. And we just need to make sure that we're not over reliant on any one of them to the exclusion or the recognition that there are other regulatory bodies out there. And so,
I'll bet you money that it's the same as the BACVs if I look at QABAs.
well, and also food for thought on this too. One of the reasons why there is some difference in some of the regulations for certain professions is because some of it was modeled after other professions in Kansas, and some of it is modeled after what the associations accept. And so when some of the other professions were talking about their continuing education or their
Right.
professional conduct, they were saying, well, should we follow our association? But then as much as possible, we're trying to standardize things between the professions as well.
within the state,
So it's kind of trying to find the split between the two.
yeah.
I was wrong. I just need to say it out loud. There was only 20 units, which I think is bonkers. So there's that. You're welcome.
Other professions on the board have 40 and 50, so you.
So let's up it to 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Oh, no, I'm not wrong. I'm so sorry. Nope. It says there are 12 CEUs due at the ABAT, 20 CEUs for the supervisees, and 32 CEUs for QBAs. Boom.
Well,
So,
I realize that you all just received this regulation to kind of review, and so asking you for specific recommendations today may be a little premature, but think about that suggested change for item 4 and 5 in terms of updating the language. And then also, we've talked about with some other advisory committees, item number 7 is a self-directed learning project pre-approved by the board. For the other committees, Leslie has mentioned that she doesn't see a lot of people requesting to do this. And it seems like the same subject matter could be covered by other elements. So it seems like that might be an item suitable to remove from the regulation.
I also think I guess I've seen this one before, that if you're providing practicum or supervision to interns, you can count that. What's the documentation requirement on that?
You get a letter from the university.
What if you're just providing fieldwork?
right,
Like you're the only supervisor that, I mean,
that's
Theoretically.
that's a good question, though, because there's those of us that there's a supervision contract that we have to enter into with our supervisees. That everybody signs, and then there's documentation that has to be filled out, the monthly verification form that has to be filled out and signed by the supervisee and the supervisor.
So when in your documentation, continuing documentation of continuing education, I will say that the psychologists used yours as a basis.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I printed it out. I printed it out to bring it, right? Because it's like, oh, yes, the advisory committee recommended creation of a new regulation on documentation of continuing ed modeled after existing language for the behavior analyst.
Oh.
And they did
Yeah.
add,
That
if there's no person from the university that you submit something that includes the supervision dates and
Yeah.
it's signed by you and the supervisee.
Okay, so we have
Interesting.
Yeah,
So
that,
if that's not in there, then when we start talking about it, we can add it to your.
that. Okay.
Yeah. that was one of the last actions by outgoing board member Rick Steele.
Yeah.
He was the one who kind of headlined that new edition, so.
Go Rick.
You can also
All right,
have
so-
coursework, so in the PhD level coursework.
But yeah, if you don't mind, if you could review 102-8-9 and be ready to discuss it at the next meeting, any possible changes or additions. And even if it's just small items like cleanup, that's fine too.
Right,
This helps because we do want to have good regulations, but we also want to be able to tell the legislature we're doing a responsible job of reviewing these, making
Yeah.
sure they're updated, and if there's any vagueness, we're clearing that up. If there's new items, we're making improvements.
yeah, got it, got it circled. All right, so, this also, it's not really tabled, you guys, but let's review this for next time and come back with some specific recommendations for
Same thing with.
KAR 102-8-9 and KAR 102-8-10, because that's the documentation of.
Yeah, they kind of go together in a nice way.
All right. This goes back here. Look at, I even have page protectors.
You are just.
Did you notice? All right, so. All right, so David, I know that we had taught that that I have heard talk on committees about the reinstating licenses, because right now we don't have, like, if somebody misses their deadline, we don't have an option at this point that allows these guys to reinstate the license for a fee. Right? It's not that they did something bad. It's not that they didn't have their educational requirements. It's that they were in Maui when their licensing came up and the transmission didn't go through and they missed the deadline. Right? So is that pretty accurate?
Yeah.
So, you want to talk about that or what we need
Wasn't
to
this
do?
included in that Senate or that House bill that we talked about last time and it got taken out?
No,
No.
we were able to add it.
Oh, okay.
It was a late addition, but yeah, when the behavior analyst statutes were created, they were modeled differently than the other professions. And so the authorizing statute that says the authority of the BSRB did not include language to say that licenses could be reinstated. So if someone's license expired, they would have to reapply. And from a public protection standpoint, that's not great because then you have two different license numbers.
Right, 3 and 4.
And if you're trying to verify this is the same person, if they have multiple license numbers, it's hard to track. And it's also, inconvenient for the person to have to go ahead and reapply as well. And so one of the items that we put into the big bill, partially in terms of just cleanup and logical improvements, we put in language to allow us to be able to reinstate the licenses, but that still needed to be defined in regulations. So the statute gives us the authority to give regulations, and now we're at the point where we can discuss new language and regulations. So in your packet of material, you have a copy of, so there's really two types. We use reinstatement in a way that maybe some other jurisdictions don't. Reinstatement for us means you get your license back. And that can be because it was suspended or revoked. It can also mean that it was expired and now you have it back. And so what I gave you is a copy of those two different scenarios. The first was from the addiction counselor's profession, and that's a copy of KAR 102-7-7A, which is reinstatement after suspension or revocation of a license. And so feel free to review that language. But this would essentially outline a process by which we could review for people who had a license removed because of a disciplinary reason. and how they would get that license back.
Can you say that statute gives us the authority to set regulations? Is that what you said?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because basically, we don't have any authority unless it comes from law. And so the laws are changed to the statutes. But if the statutory authority doesn't give us the ability to give regulations, we can't promulgate the regulations. And so that language was missing from the statutes. And so we got it added to the bill. And then when that passed, it basically said the authority of the BSRB is to license, renew a license. And what we added there was to reinstate a license. And so now that we have that broad authority, we can do the regulations on how that process actually works. And so this would talk about, the first one would be an example of language to get the license back after it was removed for disciplinary reasons. The second is just kind of general language that it's modeled after what we have in the statutes for the other professions. And that really has to do with reinstating the license after it is expired. And so it really just kind of talks about the ability to put a fee for the reinstatement of a license. And then for the other professions, what we have done is we've created the ability to have a 6-month temporary reinstatement license for individuals. Let's say they've been out of the profession for a number of years. To come back, they have to have not only paid the appropriate fee, but also meet all their continuing education hours from the last time period. So what the other professions had added to the bill was new language, which allowed for a 6-month temporary reinstatement license. If you wanted to come back and practice, but you haven't accrued all those hours, you could get this short-term license to be able to practice immediately under this temporary license, finish your hours. And then once you had finished your hours, you could get your license permanently reinstated.
Interesting.
So that's something to think about. That's what was put into the bill for most of those professions. So just think about those two scenarios in terms of what language you think would be appropriate for your profession.
Okay, and that's one that is Article 7 licensing of addiction counselors.
So that's the language and the regulation if someone lost a license because of suspension or it being revoked. So that's more of a
Okay.
disciplinary type thing.
Okay,
So we don't have one of those for behavior analysts at all. There's no, once you get it revoked in the state of Kansas, it's behavior analyst cannot get it back
correct.
currently.
They would have to reapply.
Reapply.
Oh, and meet the current.
Mhm.
And be approved by the board.
Right. They could take into consideration anything from the past, but there's not a way for it to be reinstated or reactivated.
And that's problematic. I'm a little bit sensitive to that because back in my original psych license was 2005, I think, maybe. And then somewhere around 2010, my office manager, who was supposed to send in my stuff, didn't do it. And I was on vacation in Gulf Shores and I got notification that my license was suspended. And so I immediately called up here. I'm just like, she had all the stuff. I had all my CEs, She had not submitted it. And I had to get a different, I think, I don't know if I got a different license number or not, but the thing that it did do, when you're trying to enroll with insurance companies,
Now
you have to be practicing for X number of years. And now I wasn't. Because that original license, that original 5 years no longer counted because the new line of demarcation started in 2010.
I had a BCBA that missed her deadline too, and she had to just get a new license, which was a pain in the butt. I didn't know that there wasn't a process for like after suspension or.
Right.
Yeah, people have asked about it before. We're really limited on what the statute lets us do. And so when we were talking about those other legislative cleanups, we were like, it'd be really nice to put this item in for behavior and analysts. And it would also be nice to put in the language as far as having the same disciplinary remedies. We talked about that a little bit, I think in the fall last year.
Did you send out a different regulation? Other than Article 7?
So there was Article 7, and then I have one page of just example. It says example language of license reinstatement language from sub for 2023 sub percent to 131. So you may not have received
I
it.
print that out.
Okay.
All right, you have another one?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
It's also in 277. There's a late renewal, which is the same thing.
Would suspension and expiration, are those the same thing?
Two different things.
Two different things.
Yeah, suspension is probably going to happen if you have done something that involves disciplinary conduct.
Yeah.
Expiration, you just didn't renew, and a lot of people have their license expire normally.
Yeah.
Because you stop practicing, and then there's really not a good way to end your license early. A lot of people just let it run until it expires and then that's it.
Is there, so I know for the BACB, sorry, to keep going back to them. We have a way to like put our license to be inactive. Is that also not a thing we can do with behavior? That's not what anybody can do.
No,
Not ours, no, we
No.
don't have that.
the board talked about that, I believe, in the past. I think the concern was if you have an inactive license, would there be a concern about people misrepresenting themselves? Because technically they still have a title, but it's not an active license.
Mhm.
So if you call yourself a behavior analyst, but you really don't have an active license, is it misleading the public or is it still fair? And so as opposed to having an inactive license, they just wanted to leave it as it's either you have an active license or you don't have a license.
That makes sense.
And with the expiration component, would it then be backdated to when it originally expired?
It would
So
be
those-
from the date we received the reinstatement.
Right, so then that could cause the same issue that Linda was describing, where you don't have a continuous.
Mhm.
So this doesn't solve that problem,
No.
that specific.
It doesn't solve an issue with the gap. It would help people instead of having to reapply from the very beginning of that process.
Is that something that would have to go back to I'm really trying here, back to
Mhm.
statute to get that?
Yes.
Cause I mean, that's how, if we are late on our BCBA's, they go back to the original expiration date. As long as we've shown that like, we have like a 60-day, 30-day something.
Grace period.
Grace
Mhm.
period where it says as long as you get your stuff in before then you pay a exuberant late fee. And it goes back to the date as long as you've done your CEUs and maintained the other.
Well, and I mean, you have a little bit different regulations than the other professions because the other professions, and in several ways. But some of the other professions, some of this is outlined specifically in statute, and then the regulations are a little bit different because the statute already says what it says. For your profession, in a lot of cases, it says the BSRB will make regulations on this topic, and that's all it says in the statute. And then we have opportunity to do that in regulation. So, so if we did want to look at having something a little bit differently in terms of having a late fee, that is something you could have a discussion on and forward back to the board. Ultimately, the board may weigh differently based on wanting to have uniformity, but it definitely doesn't mean that you can't talk about it or make a recommendation if you think that's a good idea.
What do you guys think of that, Emily and Alice?
Unmute button. There we go.
Yeah.
I see thumbs up.
So that what we do is, maybe come up with the language at our next meeting on a recommendation to the board
Mhm.
For the
Right,
gap time.
for the gap.
And this may be, so just to let you know, since you're adding members, what we would traditionally do is do the training for board members and advisory committee members at the meeting that followed adding new people. To make sure they're up to speed on their responsibilities and different things like that. That training is lengthy, does take about an hour. So we have some other items on the agenda, but if any of these aren't done at the next meeting, they could still go to the December meeting.
If I was you, I would send that out as a packet of information and let everybody know there's gonna be a quiz on it. And if they don't pass the quiz, they're not able to,
You can't stay on the
you
committee.
can't stay on the board.
I love that. Let's do that. Cause I do remember that training being.
And they can get a CEU.
Yeah,
She stays provider, we can do it, it'll be fine.
David, you just need to videotape yourself and then we can make a quiz of it.
yes.
I do remember that training being very interesting.
It's a lot of information.
It's a lot of information, and I just think that, we should do like you watch those presentations that it comes up with the words. And you can't get CEs unless you see the word and write it down and come up with the words at the end of it, right? That forces you to write, yeah. So we could totally do that and they have to write down the words.
I put like random things in mine when I was doing CEUs for a previous place. I would be like in the corner of the PowerPoint slide, like. Make sure they're paying attention.
Yeah,
It worked really well.
I know it does.
I sent out a training one time to my ISPs and put that in there, and only one of them out of 55 sent me their favorite color, and I was like, I'm taking you to lunch, let's go.
Like that.
So, So here's our charge for next time, because, so we'll have to be prepared. Because the first hour of the next meeting is going to be the PowerPoint presentation on obligations of a subcommittee board member. And so we're not gonna have very much time for other things, and we've already tabled the changes for unprofessional conduct, so we'll just all have to make a commitment that we come prepared, right? Because we tabled the unprofessional conduct and the continuing ed, like potential revisions to that. And then we're also saying we're gonna come with language that we're gonna recommend to the broader board for gaps, license reinstatement.
For the reinstating licenses, I can create a draft and send to David to send out. to you guys.
Oh, that's an excellent idea. Thank you, Christy.
That would
You
be
are
great.
always such a good team player.
It sounds like Alex
Dang it.
wants to do that for continuing.
I sure do.
Okay,
Let me do that.
all right,
Yeah, just send them to me and I'm happy to distribute them to members of the committee.
perfect. Make sure you get that in the notes.
Please do. My whole ADHD is on fire day, so I'll make sure to do it. I do have one thing I wanted to ask before we adjourn.
Well, we don't, we have one more thing on here too. Sorry.
It says next meeting.
No, D.
I didn't-
Oh,
I'll keep them in line.
I've been trying, okay? It's Friday afternoon. I checked the Celsius. Here we go.
All right, so, moving on to the final topic on our agenda, because we already set our next meeting, is, number 7D, possible new regulation concerning location of client.
Yes, and
And that would be the last thing in your packet.
And just to kind of frame this, so this is, as you can see from the top, is a regulation from the marriage and family therapy profession. So it's really just an example for you to look at. But the other professions for the BSRB have a regulation that specifically indicates that basically it has to do with services rendered to individuals located in the state. And it talks about we look for the location of the client at the time the client is receiving services in order to determine if the individual should be providing services here in the state of Kansas. And so other states look at both the location of the client and the location of the practitioner. And some would say you have to be licensed in both locations, but with the prevalence of telehealth, what the other professions have basically put in place is regulations that say, you know, if someone is being treated, we look to see, is that person located in Kansas? And if they are, that person needs to be licensed, whether they are physically here or out of state.
Yeah.
There is not a similar regulation for the behavior analyst profession. And so people have asked me, and I said, well, the BSRB consistently holds this, but I think for consistency and transparency, it might be helpful to have a similar one added for your profession as well. So
yes. I think that will clear up a lot of confusion. It's been especially since COVID,
Yeah.
it's been a topic of.
Emily and Alice, do you have any objections to what we were just talking about, where as long as they're licensed, I see you shaking your head no? I think we're all in agreement on that, that as long as the client's in Kansas, the behavior analyst would have to be licensed in Kansas, and then if they're like doing telehealth, that would be acceptable, correct? Yeah. So do you draft the language?
yeah,
Okay.
we can put
We
together
will
some.
make you do it.
Yeah.
I'm writing your guys' names on my.
We will use this.
Sorry.
We'll use this as a model and we'll bring something back for you.
Okay,
But we wanted to talk about it philosophically first to make sure that you were still on board. And I think for consistency and transparency, like we said, it would be helpful to have something we could point to for your profession as well.
And this may be too detailed, but because we're so close to Missouri, there may be a question of, it says located in. If a family lives in Kansas, they're receiving services they're physically receiving services in Missouri. Is it the physical location that the
Yes,
services are
When the
provided?
services are
Yeah,
provided,
okay.
The
yes.
so they
physical
would have to
location-
be, licensed in Missouri then.
So let's say like,
family wants to do a session at Worlds of Fun, then the clinician, if they were gonna provide services at Worlds of Fun, they would need to be licensed. in Missouri.
So,
We can't dictate that, but Missouri can.
right,
But
right.
they would be out of BSRB.
Yes.
If the client, every state has some jurisdiction to determine what the appropriate standard is when the client is physically in that state. And so if the client was in Kansas, we can really give parameters on that. Clients in Missouri, what we would say is, we're not saying it's okay. We would just say as far as our authority, that doesn't involve something that we would report on your behalf. But we would strongly recommend you reach out to Missouri to find out what their standard is that you are in compliance with that too.
So
I just had that conversation. You know,
Just-
we're
yeah.
borders that,
Yeah.
we're border.
If Walmart's across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But people
Yeah.
sometimes will ask us, is that okay? And am I gonna get in trouble with your board? And I said, well,
Not with those.
just because you're not getting in trouble with us doesn't mean that it's okay. That's kind of a very broad, we have different jurisdictions and different authorities. We can tell you what we would do, but it's in your best interest to make sure you're good with that state.
Then
I
I
don't-
guess my only,
Like if the client is in Kansas and the therapist has a Kansas license, but they are in a different state, how does that fit into this conversation?
As far as we are concerned, that would be okay, because the client is here and they have a license to practice here. So that is okay, because they're practicing into Kansas.
Yep.
But wherever the therapist or the analyst is located, we would recommend that if they're in a different state, they talk to that state to make sure they're okay, as long as what that state requires to.
or touch.
Or
All
country as
right.
well.
Well, it's 3:02, so we're 2 minutes past.
I have something I just want to get it on an agenda at some point in the next
Uh-huh.
5 years, okay? Regulate statutes, regulations, discussions about the use of artificial intelligence in the wider scope of a licensee. I think it's going to come up very, very quickly, and I think it's going to be very impactful to all fields, not just behavior analysts, but I think that we need to at least have a discussion about how it may influence behavior.
I think that's great, and if we can put that on like as an agenda topic for January. Or whatever that first one is, because I'd love to be able to clear all this stuff off. It's been hanging on here for a while.
Sure.
Let's get this, let's make a concentrated effort to get this stuff cleared off. And then that way we can start being aspirational. Right, in our discussions. And so, how does that,
At least it's in the notes, that's all I cared about.
No, that sounds good. And if you want to look, this is probably not completely on point, but it involves the same topic. There is something in terms of the use of computerized psychological tests for psychology. It's KAR 102-4-13. So it doesn't kind of go as broadly as all artificial intelligence, but the use of computerized devices in terms of what role they should play. Part of that is probably at least basically addressed in some of the other regulations for the profession. But I'm sure based on how technology has changed, there's a lot more ground for us to talk about.
absolutely. All right, anything else that we want to get on record before I entertain a motion to adjourn?
Well, since you asked. Opened it up. I wasn't just gonna blurt it out, I guess. So for the wording for D, you mentioned that you'd come up with that wording. Will that come back to us, or will you just go ahead and move forward?
I'll bring it back to you guys at the next meeting.
Okay. I have two thoughts about it. Should I just save that for the next meeting?
No,
Okay. So in the conversation we were having, I think putting physical location instead of just that the client is located in the state would help clarify that.
Oh, yeah,
Question I just
good
asked.
point.
Regardless, and potentially even like regardless of residence,
Mhm.
just to make that super clear. And then potentially also putting in like the location, like clarifying also the location of the physician of the provider. So the licensee can be outside Kansas, just to like.
As long as
make
they
it
are
clear as
licensed. They have to carry a Kansas license.
Well, and they need to be encouraged to look at the, where they physically are located.
Yes, yeah.
Policies on that, because they're, Missouri, I think, if you're in the state, you need to be licensed, but there are other states that like.
Some states are opposite of us.
Yes, they are.
Some states look at where the therapist or the
Yeah,
clinician is located.
At some states. look
Texas
at
is
both.
one of those.
Yeah. Are they?
Yeah, I only know that because I was gonna do something on vacation for a client one time. Yeah, I was like, oh, that's not. gonna
I
All right.
apologize. It's a Friday that I'm running between meetings, so I'm going to have to log off. It's been a great conversation, but I apologize. I have to run. I'll see you all in a couple months.
Thanks,
A
Emily.
motion to adjourn.
Thank
All right,
you too.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting's adjourned.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank
Guys,
you.
we call punch, so I don't walk out of here with.
Yes, we do.
papers.